Good morning, Nashville. We are devastated by how this weekend's winter storm has unfolded, leaving our city coated in at least a half an inch of ice. Mayor Freddie O'Connell has declared a state of emergency for Davidson County, and he has asked everyone to please shelter in place. Countless trees and power lines are down, and nearly half of Nashville electric customers were or are without power after the weekend storm. NES is working tirelessly to get your power back on, but according to the Tennessean, full power is expected to take days, not hours, to restore. Additional crews are arriving, and NES will have close to 300 line workers in the field starting this morning. If you are experiencing a power outage, please text OUT to 637797 or visit nespower.com. Officials are asking that we reserve all 911 calls for emergencies only, and that includes reporting down power lines. For everything else, call 311 or visit hub.nashville.gov. Nashville Severe Weather has said that today's temperatures are not expected to rise above the teens, with wind chills as low as -10 degrees through noon tomorrow. And for those who do not have a heat source, this is life-threatening cold, so please check in on your neighbors. If you are without heat, Metro has opened emergency warming locations at fire stations and community centers. These places will be open 24/7 and pets are welcome. They will not be providing beds or bedding, so bring what you need to stay as long as you need. For more information, again, visit hub.nashville.gov. Please check in on your neighbors, especially elderly residents, and don't go anywhere if you don't have to. Stay safe, Nashville. And now, on with the show. Today on CityCast Nashville, this year marks 250 years since the founding of the United States. But how does Nashville plan to commemorate this milestone? And who gets to decide which stories are celebrated and which are left untold? Joining us are John Dichtel, President and CEO of the American Association for State and Local History, and Ashley Howell, Executive Director of the Tennessee State Museum. They're here to explain how America 250 is being planned nationally, across Tennessee, and right here in Nashville. It's Monday, January 26th. I'm your host, Marie Cecile Anderson, and this is what Nashville's talking about. John, you're the president of the American Association for State and Local History, which is based right here in Nashville. So for Nashville listeners who keep hearing America 250 but aren't entirely sure what that means, what are we counting down for? What is America 250?
Okay. Starting way back at the beginning. So America 250 is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, July 4th this year, but it's the entire year of commemorative efforts and events around the country, some being led nationally, some being organized by the states. Every community in the country is going to be involved. There is an entity called America 250, which is the nonprofit administrative arm of the U.S. Semiquincentennial Commission, which was formed in 2016 by Congress. Every time there's a big commemoration, Lincoln's birthday, Congress will form a commission. This one is made up of 8 members of Congress and 16 private citizens, and it's been leading the planning for the last 10 years, at least from the federal perspective. It does a lot of branding. It's organizing some national events.
Someone is really good at project management there. What challenges have they run into both nationally and here in Tennessee? Ashley, you are actually the chair of our Tennessee State Commission. What have you seen?
Funding was a big issue initially because all of the planning here in Tennessee, it's Tennessee funded. The State Commission has really stepped in to assist with funding projects, and all of those details can be found at tn250.com. So as people are thinking about a road trip or a project, we're just interested to see how state funding has gone to support projects. I encourage listeners to visit that website.
So are other states then federally funded?
I'm shaking my head here. No, Tennessee is being treated like all other states. None of them are getting federal funding from the commission. And that was an expectation because that's what happened during the bicentennial. And there's still a lot of people alive today who lived through the bicentennial and really thought things would operate the same way. There was a commission in 1976 or leading up to 76, and there was some federal money, seed money to get things going. And that has really not been the case this year. And then in last year, the first year of this new administration, we also saw downsizing of the National Endowment for the Humanities, downsizing of the Institute for Museum and Library Services, which is another federal agency that provides grants, challenges to the Park Service, challenges to the Smithsonian. Not only were we not expecting that, but I think many of us were hoping that the 250th would be a time when those things were actually expanded and supported. But instead, we spent the last year kind of doing triage or trying to do first aid for deal with those challenges to federal institutions. But the good news is the states have been doing a fantastic job, and the states have been finding state money and local sponsorships and funders, and that is ultimately the great American way to fund things locally. Tennessee, I would count among the generous states, and then a lot of other states. The commissions are barely being funded.
Okay, so Tennessee is being generously funded for this celebration. That's terrific. Way to go, us. So Ashley, you're also the director of the Tennessee State Museum. Tell us about the party you're planning.
John was talking about the importance of the bicentennial. One of the things we know here at the museum is this is a time where people are looking to history. So at the Tennessee State Museum, we wanted to really show up for that. So this month, we have opened an exhibition that draws on our collection, Tennessee Voices, America's Stories, to highlight Tennesseans and their contributions for the past 250 plus years. I encourage listeners to come see us to engage with this exhibition because as you leave, we ask the question, what do you want to see in the future as a Tennessean? And to really think about our own individual contributions to the country, to the state, and here in Nashville.
And I talk about this all the time, folks. The Tennessee State Museum is one of my favorite museums in town. It's free. But Ashley, how were you able to narrow down the artifacts for this particular exhibition?
The process is one of the great things about working in a museum, to really think about America 250, the themes. How do we tell that story? We started several years ago just thinking about how can we contribute. And we went to our collection, talked about the stories, talked about the individuals. We have new acquisitions. Many of these objects, this is the first time they have been on display. An example is Barry Wilmore, the astronaut who spent many days at the ISS, the space station. He gifted his Tennessee flag that he took with him on that mission. And so we have his flight suit and that flag. So that's an object to see. But all of these artifacts are arranged with the idea of the preamble of the Constitution. So we talk about the blessings of liberty, a theme John knows well, we the people. But we also talk about a more perfect union, to really think about the concepts that are part of the founding of the country and how we bring those to present day.
Well, we at CityCast Nashville, we're so lucky to interview Butch Wilmore from space, so we're going to have to come check that out. But Ashley, I got to ask the blunt question. The state of Tennessee has a history of sidelining Nashville because of our progressive politics. Do you think the state's America 250 celebration will include Nashville?
The state convention has really looked, do we have events, programs across the state? Nashville is very much a part of the state. I mean, we're central to the state. The funding that we received from the state, a large portion, the majority, is to be re-granted to organizations across the state. So here in Nashville, we are supporting programs at the Frist Art Museum, TPAC, Travelers Rest, the Hermitage, the National Museum of African American Music. We have another grant deadline closing next week. And so that list will just continue to grow.
I'd like to just zoom out. We're talking about Nashville and Tennessee, but John, America 250 is a huge celebration, and so many people are really excited about it, but also our history is so complicated and quite painful for many. Do you think this moment will actually tell that full story?
Yeah, we certainly hope so. That has been our message as an association to our members all over the country, that this really needs to be a grassroots commemoration. There will be these wonderful national things that happen, but people will remember where they were in 2026 and how they celebrated at all these local history sites, historic monuments, national park sites. It's going to be experienced locally in the grassroots, and part of that experience will be, we hope, will be a full and rich and honest reckoning with the past, telling everyone's story, understanding that America is made of many threads woven together, and that this really will be an inclusive commemoration, an inclusive history. And in many ways, I think the bicentennial was that, or tried to be that, and we certainly have learned a lot as museums and historians over the past 50 years, and so it should be even more inclusive. And that's been our message. Ashley mentioned the theme, We the People. Our association came up with 5 themes for the commemoration: Power of Place, We the People, the American Experiment. I think Ashley kind of phrased it there as more perfect union, the same idea that this is an ongoing experiment and that the founders of the country saw it that way, as not quite perfected, and that it would take the full history of the country to perfect it. So those historical themes, a lot of states have built off them, are coming up with their own, but all of them, I'm seeing everywhere a real interest in making this inclusive and honest and truthful, and not just purely celebratory, but looking at the tough times and the difficult times as well, and trying to improve upon that.
Y'all, what is it like to be a historian in 2026? We see challenges to history constantly in the headlines, from the Trump administration, the Smithsonian removing language from exhibits, the federal government removing references to DEI. Are we losing the truth here in the U.S., or is this an opportunity to reclaim that?
I think there are certainly attempts at losing the truth and whitewashing it and using history. I mean, history is always used for political purposes, so that's not new. This is just really unprecedented in the scale and, I guess, vigor with which it's being pursued. But the good news is that history organizations, professional associations like ours, the American Association for State and Local History, and then individual history museums, historical societies, we're all in this struggle together to continue to do what we've been doing for decades, which is offering the full story, inviting everyone in, and trying to engage everyone in the community, and trying to be, I guess, one good thing that's come out of all these attacks on history is that it's helping make the case that history organizations are really central, and history is central to our communities and to our civic life, and that history has a role. Understanding history and taking a critical look at evidence, as historians do, is really important in any democracy. And so I guess there's maybe a small silver lining.
Who is ultimately driving the narrative of what America 250 celebrates, both nationally and here in Tennessee?
I mean, I think that's a great question. I think it is many individuals, institutions, the state commission, we're really reaching out to support organizations across Tennessee. So it is setting the table for how do you choose to participate. And if we can support archival research or historic preservation or exhibitions and programs, that's our goal. I think nationally, we have seen the connections and the partnerships across state lines to come up with initiatives like America's Potluck, which is inviting Americans to sit with neighbors, colleagues, friends, family on July 5th and have a conversation over the dinner table. That's a concept that is sort of in the spirit of the commemoration and is an example of this national wish for these meaningful connections.
Well, speaking of meaningful connections, I was so happy to see that Dolly Parton and Governor Bill Lee launched America 250 with a short film titled Tennessee, the Original Frontier. I just watched that, which was, anything Dolly I'm here for. What was the story Tennessee was trying to tell there, and has that story shifted at all since planning began?
First off, Governor Lee has been incredibly supportive and encouraging about America 250 and Tennessee's plans. And a part of what he is doing in his final year as governor is visiting all 95 counties. And he is somebody who has embraced the history and the stories of each county. So that video really came from his vision, his team's vision in how to really celebrate Tennessee in this 250th year.
Okay, as locals who are not the governor, how can we participate? Are there events or ways to contribute our stories to the celebration?
As John talked about, history practitioners visit a historical marker or engage with a local story, visit a museum, visit a library, just engage with the history around you. But I would say, too, kind of think about your own story and how we can participate and be a part of that narrative. At some point during this year, we will have our America's Story come to Nashville, which is an Airstream trailer recording oral histories. That's an example too. Talking with family members, just talking about your own personal history is very much a part of this year.
In talking with friends and even some of our community leaders here in Nashville, a lot of people right now feel conflicted and they're frustrated and maybe even disillusioned with our country, but still moved at the end of the day by the symbolism and ideals of what America is meant to represent. So heading into America 250, how do we hold both those things at the same time in order to celebrate, our past, present, and our future?
Well, in answer to that question and following up on what Ashley was saying, the 250th this year, 2026, is also an opportunity to kind of recommit yourself, all of us as citizens, as voters, following local government, having a voice in what happens at the state level, following national politics maybe a little more closely. That's another way to participate in 2026. There are difficult times. Now is a difficult time. The country is very split, very partisan. There seems to be more news than ever. Every day just is like 2 weeks worth of news each day. And we all thought that would kind of stop 5 years ago or 4 years ago or 3 years ago. And our lives just keeps becoming more and more complicated and more political news of all kinds. And I think it's always going to be that way. But I think it's important to realize also that this country has a long history, and there have been very difficult times in the past. And occasionally we hear historians or other commentators pop up and point us back to the Civil Rights era, or the years leading up to the Civil War, or even how in Revolutionary America, or right after the Revolution, how the Federalists and their enemies, Jefferson and Adams, kind of went at each other. Things were ugly and have been ugly at various times, and you just have to take comfort, I guess, in that things will get better and we'll find our way through it. And 2026 is an opportunity to look back at those difficult times and see how we got through it, and just realize that it's all worth it, that we have built an incredible democracy. It's getting frayed on the edges, perhaps, but this is we use these 50-year anniversaries to recommit and reconnect.
I would just say, to John's point, this is a time to read those founding documents and to really think about the civics process. Many times people will say to me or to members of the team, I haven't studied civics since the 8th grade or the 6th grade. This is the time to look at those early documents and reflect.
And then let's end on a very positive note. Again, this is a huge celebration. What are you both most excited to celebrate here in Nashville?
I'm looking forward to being here and not traveling in July to enjoy everything leading up to July 4th, not just the fireworks, but all the kinds of things that we've been talking about, and connecting with neighbors and family and friends, and probably around a potluck. As Ashley mentioned, there's this great, many of the states are participating in this America's Potluck program, encouraging people to get together with friends and neighbors and reconnect over food. So I'll certainly be doing that, and probably doing that many times.
Yeah, I would say I'm just looking forward to all of the events and programs. The fireworks on July 4th this year, it's going to mean something a little probably different to me, being a part of this process. I'm looking forward to seeing Suffs at TPAC.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to just great programming happening across the state, and that's one of the best things about this position and this job, is really engaging so many institutions across this great state.
Yeah, speaking of organizations across the state, Tennessee has something like 380 history organizations, which is about average, I think, for states, but they're everywhere. And they're not just here in Nashville. There's a bunch in Nashville, certainly some of the best, but it's also an opportunity to get out, as Ashley said, and visit historic sites and visit history museums. Connecting to other parts of the state would be a great thing to do this spring and summer and fall.
Well, so it sounds like despite all the challenges we're seeing in our past history and in this year, we're going to pull off this America 250 here in Tennessee and celebrate it with different diverse voices. And it's an exciting time to be doing this. And so again, tn250.com. Please check that out, and let's celebrate our state and all that we have persevered through to get to where we are today. So Ashley, John, thank you both so much for being on the show today and celebrating where we've come from and where we're headed.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you.
That's all for today here on CityCast Nashville. And don't forget, you can support this show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Nashville neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell your friends, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Nashville newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Toodles.